Hello everyone and welcome back to Witchinary. If you have yet to subscribe to this channel, then please do so because we are getting crafty, and today I wanted to bring to you my creations using the My Monthly Hero Art Kit for December 2018. This kit is super whimsical. It brings a ton of fairy, mice, daisy, and dandelion images. The theme is wishing. It also brings this awesome shimmer cardstock, and if you've been a subscriber for a while, they also threw in a thank you coordinating stamp set that brings this cute little mouse on it. It also brings a silver jelly roll pen and some moonshine sequins. From my stash, I'm also pulling out some Simon Says Stamp cotton candy cardstock and some wine cardstock from Paper Presentation. To get started, I'm going to heat emboss all of my images onto some Strathmore watercolor paper using some Simon Says Stamp embossing ink and some Hero Arts gold embossing powder, which I will be using throughout a lot of this video. For Christmas, I did end up getting the Simon Says Stamp Crafty parcel, and in the Crafty parcel, I ended up getting some Jane Davenport watercolor inks, which I was very happy with because I've been eyeballing them for a while. And my boss has them as well, so I really wanted to play with them, and I was very happy, and I took the opportunity to use this kit to kind of bring them out and play with them. Now, if you're new to my channel, then you should probably know that whenever I get anything new that's like color related, my first sort of thing is to make a night sky. So that's what I'm gonna do with my first background. But first, I wanted to go ahead and experiment with my actual color blending. So I'm gonna do all of my coloring for my daisies and die cutting and the rest of my coloring kind of off camera, but I kind of wanted to give you guys a little peek of what that looks like before actually jumping ahead on my first card. I'm gonna do a quick water wash before starting experimenting with my actual colors for a night sky. According to the color key, I'm using a little bit of Best Friend, Fairy Tale, Ladybug, Mystic, Royal Ink, and Mermaid. I thought these were really pretty colors to kind of make a night sky with, and I did many layers, and I zapped my Strathmore watercolor paper with my heat tool a couple of times just so I can get a good saturated background. Now, I also have to apologize to you guys ahead of time. I did not realize that I had my hyperlapse on while making my first card, so everything moves by very quickly. Essentially, I just raised up my two images on some foam squares, and then I took my glue pen to just make a little sequin mosaic of my background, and that kind of like wrapped up a lot of what I wanted to do here. I felt like that mosaic added an extra shiny, glimmery, quality to my card that just really made it super extra, and I loved it. I took out my Singo white gel pen to just add a little bit of stars and dots around that actual mosaic to add a little bit of interest, and then I took out the sentiment that said never stop dreaming, and I heat embossed the sentiment onto some of that pink shimmer cardstock that came in this kit. And after I was done heat embossing it with some Hero Arts gold embossing powder and raising it up on some foam squares just to give a little bit more dimension and balance, that finished off this first card, and it's really pretty. I love it. For my second card, I wanted to do quite a bit of distress ink blending, and I do a lot of distress inking throughout the rest of this video. While going through social media, I saw that a lot of people were doing variations of a night sky, but they were very much like galaxy night skies, so I wanted to make skies that vary different times of the night, ranging from sunset all the way up to dawn. So for this background, I'm using some Distress inks in Fossilized Amber and Squeezed Lemonade. I'm also going to be using some Spiced Marmalade, some Dusty Concord, and on the corners I used a little bit of Chipped Sapphire to give this background a little bit of dimension. It looked a little bit Halloweenish, but in my eyes it just kind of looked like a really good sunset, so that's what I'm going with. Off camera, I'm going to be using a ton of multimedia matte glue because I always forget the Strathmore watercolor paper does not adhere well down to card bases, so just a heads up. I go ahead and I raise up my little fungus or my little mushroom and my mouse up with some foam squares, and I'm also going to be doing that for this cute little dandelion. Off camera, I did also heat emboss a couple of those add-on little mice. I thought they were so cute, so I fussy cut him out and then I adhered him down to this card. I thought he was perfect for what I was going for. From my stash, I pulled out some Delicata copper and, well, some copper ink, and I wanted to stamp down some of those cute little dandelion florets, just as they were kind of like going away in the breeze, you know, just doing their own thing. But I felt like that wasn't present enough against this background, so I pulled out my white gel pen again and I just made a few more dots and stars so I can give the illusion of movement on my card. Once I was done doing that, I adhered down my panel down to some wine cardstock or a wine card base, and then I took a strip of that green shimmery cardstock that came in this kit and I heat embossed the sentiment "Hold on to your wishes" with some Hero Arts black embossing ink. I thought the sentiment was perfect for the two characters that are holding on to another mouse's wishes. Once I was done adhering that down to my card and cutting off the excess, that finished off this card. For my next card, I really wanted to figure out if I could actually maybe do like my own super like stardusty shimmer custom background with just this white shimmer cardstock and some distress ink. I found out you could, so if you want to use this technique, I totally recommend it. It's really pretty and you won't regret it, honestly. For this background, I was kind of going with like a twilight sort of background, like, you know, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity of doing this, but going outside at like 3 a.m. right as like the night is just blue for whatever reason. So well, not 3 a.m., more like 5 a.m., right before the sun starts coming up and you can kind of see a little bit of light in the horizon, but everything is still blue. So that's what I was going with, and I used some chipped sapphire for this. I will warn you, if you want to make this background, the distress ink kind of stays a little bit wet, so you have to give it a little bit of a chance to dry. I didn't figure this out immediately because I was just kind of playing with this kit for the sake of playing with it. So yeah. I adhere down my flowers with a combination of my tape runner and some foam squares. Off camera, I also used a little bit of multimedia matte glue because my paper just did not feel like adhering to itself, so yeah. I raise up my little ladybugs with some foam squares just to give a little bit of dimension and a little bit of that buzzing sort of like feel. And I adhere down my card base onto my cotton candy cardstock to make a little card. I adhere down my little fairy, who I've made like a little earth fairy, down to the center of all of those cute little flowers with multimedia matte and some foam squares to just give her some dimension. And then I stamped down "Sending You Fairy Wishes" using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and that finished off this card. For my next card, I was starting to really dig the feel of those really shimmery twilight sort of backgrounds, so I decided to take the second half of that cardstock and I made a background that more so looked like that 3 a.m. background that I was trying to go for before. And I used some shaded lilac, some pumice stone, some dusty concord, and some distress oxide black soot distress inks to accomplish this, and I was very happy with the results of everything. I just wanted to make sure everything was very saturated. Once I was done, not embossing, but blending that entire background, it was time for me to start playing with this background. And I have to admit, I tried maybe like 30 different combinations before I actually landed on what I really wanted to do with this card base. I even thought that I knew what I was gonna do ahead of time when I was kind of playing around with these mice, but then I felt like it looked a little bit too busy, so I changed up the design kind of last minute. Everything on the left hand side stays the same, but instead of this cute little mouse that's blowing on a dandelion, I go ahead and I use that add-on mouse that came in this kit. If you've been a subscriber for a while, I figured I wanted to use him a few times because he really does blend in beautifully with this stamp set, and I don't think we give that enough credit. Once I brought him over, I realized exactly what I was doing. I was kind of like doing a little kamikaze mouse, and here I am pulling out my multimedia matte to make sure that everything adheres itself down. Fun fact, while all of this is getting done, I'm terrified of fairies and I'm terrified of mice. They literally put my two greatest fears in one kit, and let me explain this to you. So when I was a kid, I swore I saw a fairy. I'm pretty sure it was a firefly, but to a kid that didn't know a lot of English, it was really hard for my parents to kind of explain that to me. So I was terrified of fairies, thinking I saw a fairy and thinking they just pop up out of nowhere. So yeah, for a while I hated fairies. And when I was a teenager, a mouse kind of snuck up on me while I was in the kitchen, and that frightened me from mice, and ever since I've been terrified of mice. But this kit really is a huge contender for making all of those fears go away because these cards are so pretty. Anyway, once I was done making another mosaic of sequins and doing that same thing that I did before with my white gel pen, I ended up stamping down the sentiment believe onto this green shimmer cardstock, and then I raised it up with some foam squares, and that finished off this card. For my next card, I wanted to do something. I think I was going for like dawn, like dawn, or like when you can actually see the rays of the sun. And I wasn't sure how this was gonna work. I didn't really want my fossilized amber and my blueprint sketch to get kind of weird, because it could have either ended up like green or it could have ended up like brown because of orange and blue being complementary colors. So luckily, because of the cardstock, it ended up being okay. And luckily, I really liked the way that I had laid this out the first time, so I'm just gonna go ahead and adhere down those images like I had laid them out before. I am using a combination of multimedia matte and some foam squares. I go ahead and I raise up my little flower that my little mouse is going to be sitting on, and I also use some foam squares to raise them up. I finish off tucking this little dandelion that's like just sitting there and waiting behind my little mouse, and then I added a little ladybug for a little bit of interest on top of this other dandelion, which honestly I don't know why I colored them. I guess I thought at the time they were daisies, but they weren't. Anyway, once I was done adhering all of that, I wanted to give that same feel that I did for the first card, where I had those cute little dandelion flowers just floating around, but instead of using that Delicata copper ink, I'm going to be using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink just to get a bunch of those little flowers flying around to make it look like my little mouse is actually wishing on something. Also, I forgot to mention my fairy is also raised up on foam squares. These cards are very, very dimensional. Anyway, once I was done with that, I took out some Paper Source black cardstock and I heat embossed the sentiment "Never Stop Dreaming" onto it. After I was done heat embossing that sentiment, I raised it up, and that finished off this card. And I really like this card. I think it's my favorite one. For my last card, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more floral in nature, so I wanted to include all these cute little weeds. Before I could do that though, I felt like everything was too plain and I still wasn't done experimenting with my backgrounds. For this one, I was trying for a sunset, so I took out my ripe persimmon, my spiced marmalade, and a little bit of fossilized amber just to give that nice gradient of things going, you know, from really light to dark. At the corner, I also took out some wilted violet just to really give that illusion of that gradient of night coming. And once I was done going through everything and blending everything in the way I wanted, I can then start playing around with that weed sort of orientation, which is, I think, super cute, super millennial actually. I feel like this is the entire millennial aesthetic in one card. Minus the millennial pink. We're not gonna get over the millennial pink, I'm sorry. Existential crisis eggplant, that's where I'm at in life. That's what I want as a millennial color. Anyway, I'm going to tuck variations of this cute little dandelion all around. And once I was done kind of raising everything up with some foam squares, I'm going to heat emboss another sentiment onto some Paper Source black cardstock. And then after I was done doing that, I realized that I still wasn't kind of satisfied. I felt like this was too plain, and you know me, I don't know why I just can't make plain backgrounds to save my life or something that's super simple. So I took this little sleeping fairy and I decided to adhere her down so she's like kind of hanging off of the sentiment, and I like the way that this looked. I adhered it down to a piece of wine cardstock, and that finished off this card. And well guys, thank you so much for watching this video and all of my cards. Let's take a look at everything that we've made. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy New Year, by the way, if you're watching this in the new year. And I hope that you guys have a great and fabulous day. Take care.